What if the West's most trusted military shields, systems once considered unbreakable, are suddenly obsolete? Imagine the terror if the greatest threat is not a missile in the sky, but the creeping doubt infiltrating every decision room and living room in the West. For decades, the Tomahawk missile, deployed near Russia's borders, was little more than a symbol, dismissed as posturing or empty bravado. Today, those same missiles have transformed into unmistakable ultimatums, altering the calculus of regional stability and sending shockwaves through international relations. This is not mere theater. Washington is not simply rattling sabers or engaging in routine displays of force. Instead, it is physically placing weapon systems with ranges that can span entire continents right at Moscow's doorstep. Imagine if your neighbor invited you for coffee, all the while sharpening an axe on the porch, offering a smile but never letting you forget the blade. This unnerving blend of charm and threat, once Donald Trump's signature diplomatic style, has become the hallmark of Western foreign policy. The world now watches as genuine warmth and veiled menace intermingle, creating an atmosphere as unsettling as it is calculated. Western leaders have long believed that a careful mix of friendly engagement and subtle threats would keep adversaries like Russia off balance. But this era of balance is ending. Today's standoff is a test of nerves, not just firepower. Every new missile deployment acts as a warning shot. Each press release is a calculated gamble, and the sense of routine has vanished. Instead, each move feels loaded, fraught with consequences that could spiral beyond control. The most profound shift, however, is psychological. The West's confidence, once its greatest weapon, is cracking. The true danger now is that both leaders and ordinary citizens might fail to grasp just how fundamentally things have changed. The cost of missing these signals will not only be paid in lost security, but also in the erosion of the trust that holds societies together. Sociologists warn that, when public trust collapses, societies become brittle, vulnerable to both internal unrest and external manipulation. Is the global balance of power quietly tilting right beneath our noses? The answer to this question matters, not only to governments, but to every individual who relies on the promise of safety, order, and prosperity in a world that is suddenly far less predictable. Let us break down how Western confidence has eroded and why this new reality is far more dangerous than most realize, drawing on both recent events and historical precedents. Remember the era when Patriot missiles were hailed as invincible? The Gulf War of the early 1990s cemented this image in the public mind. Television screens were filled with images of Patriots intercepting Scud missiles, and headlines blared about technological superiority. This illusion shattered overnight in recent years. In actual combat, especially as observed in conflicts near Russia's borders, the effectiveness of Patriot systems has plummeted from an initial 42% to a catastrophic 6%. To put this in perspective, imagine a shield that once stopped 4 out of every 10 attacks, now fails 9 out of 10 times. These are not just cold statistics. They are a red flag waving over every Western capital. On the ground, Russian missiles are rewriting the rules of engagement. They twist mid-flight, evade interception, and confound the algorithms that once promised safety. Every time the West tries to adapt, Russia's technology shifts again, turning old certainties into liabilities. Reports from military observers in Eastern Europe describe scenes where batteries of Western air defenses are left scanning empty skies, fooled by decoys or outmaneuvered by unpredictable missile trajectories, a situation that would have been unthinkable even a decade ago. The trusted strategy, layered missile shields and reliable interception patterns, no longer works. Russia's technological leap forward means Western superiority is now in serious doubt. In confidential briefings, even the most decorated generals admit there is no reliable answer to these evolving threats. This is reminiscent of the Maginot Line in World War II, a massive French fortification rendered obsolete overnight by Germany's blitzkrieg. The lesson: technological superiority is fleeting, and over-reliance on outdated doctrines can be fatal. The cost of denial is staggering. It is not only billions squandered on hardware that can no longer perform, but also the illusion of safety sold to entire populations. In cities like Warsaw, Berlin, and Paris, people continue to live under the comforting assumption of near invulnerability, unaware that the shield they depend on now has gaping holes. Nations are exposed, financially, militarily, and psychologically. The panic among Western leaders is palpable. As Russian missiles grow smarter and more unpredictable, reputations and long-standing security guarantees unravel. Sudden, frantic policy shifts, such as the rapid redeployment of defensive assets, the hurried summoning of NATO councils, or the dramatic escalation of rhetoric, reveal just how quickly the old order is coming apart. Political leaders scramble to regain control, but each move seems only to deepen the sense of crisis. But this is more than a military crisis. The collapse of doctrine is igniting political chaos at the highest levels, leaving the West unsteady and the world's balance in question. This echoes the late 1970s, when the Soviet Union's deployment of SS-20 missiles in Eastern Europe forced NATO into a frenzied and divisive debate, shaking the alliance to its core. Today's crisis is no less destabilizing. Yet as military certainties dissolve, the West's political elite must confront a new, more dangerous reality, one where power is measured not in promises, but in results. The stakes for global security and public trust have never been higher. For the first time since the Cold War, the West faces an adversary who not only matches, but may surpass its technical prowess. What if the loudest threats from the West are not true warnings, but desperate attempts by politicians to cling to relevance? If you look closely, you'll see that many of the fiercest statements splashed across headlines are crafted not to ensure anyone's safety, but to rescue political fortunes teetering on the brink. Consider Emmanuel Macron. Domestically, he is losing his majority and facing a flood of criticism. So he seizes the international spotlight, lobbing dramatic threats at Russia, hoping that a show of strength abroad will mask frailty at home. This is not unprecedented. History is filled with leaders who used foreign crises to distract from domestic woes. Margaret Thatcher's swift response during the Falklands War, for example, helped her regain political footing at home, but such gambits are always risky. French diplomacy now feels less like sober statecraft and more like staged spectacle. Bold declarations, urgent headlines, and tough-sounding warnings dominate the airwaves, but the substance is often missing. The real decisions and real influence? They are hidden behind the curtain, debated in hushed meetings far from the cameras. There is a pattern. The deeper the crisis at home, the more aggressive the posturing abroad. Political turmoil in Paris is mirrored by theatrical threats aimed at Moscow. Leaders under siege rarely act. Instead, they make noise, hoping that spectacle will repair their image. This pattern is not unique to France. Across the West, politicians have used foreign policy bluster as a shield against internal dissent, as seen during the Suez Crisis or the Vietnam War era, when American presidents escalated overseas in hopes of uniting fractured domestic audiences. Donald Trump, on the other hand, plays by different rules. For him, every missile or Patriot battery is just another bargaining chip. His style is not mere bluster, it is calculated brinkmanship. One moment he hints at deploying Tomahawks, the next he flatters adversaries, only to return with renewed threats. This approach draws from the playbook of Richard Nixon's madman theory, where unpredictability itself is wielded as a weapon to keep rivals guessing. What makes Trump's approach so effective and so unnerving is his cultivated unpredictability. Even his closest allies cannot tell where the act ends and the reality begins. This constructive ambiguity is a classic tactic designed to keep rivals guessing and ensure that no one is quite sure where the real red lines lie. The world saw this dynamic during the 2019 standoff with Iran, where sudden escalations were followed by unexpected de-escalations, leaving all sides uncertain and nervous. The outcome is a diplomatic fog, thick with threats and promises, but thin on substance. This breeds confusion, anxiety, and a dangerous guessing game that clouds public perception. When threats become theater, people struggle to discern what is real and what is mere political survival. Some tune out, exhausted by the noise. Others panic, believing the danger is far greater than it is. Yet while Western leaders perform their dramas, something altogether different is unfolding across the border. Russian advances are not just rhetoric, they are tangible, and they are changing the rules of the game. As Western theatrics intensify, Moscow is rewriting the very definition of power. Consider the deployment of Kinzhal and Zircon hypersonic missiles, which travel at velocities exceeding Mach 8 and can maneuver unpredictably, making interception nearly impossible for current Western systems. These weapons are not just new, they represent a generational leap in warfare. When the familiar rules collapse, who rewrites the script? And what if even the players cannot predict their next move? Russia has unleashed a new breed of hypersonic, so-called smart missiles, powered by machine learning. Unlike their predecessors, each missile is unique. It analyzes its route, adapts to threats in real time, and evolves with every encounter. This is not science fiction. This is battlefield reality, and it has left Western upgrades stumbling behind. Military analysts compare this to the introduction of tanks in World War I, when the nature of warfare changed overnight and old doctrines were rendered useless. The results are as unsettling as they are dramatic. Once, Western air defenses were touted as unbreakable shields. Now, they resemble expensive props on a stage that has been overrun. Conflict reports from Ukraine, Syria, and other theaters reveal Western system effectiveness plunging into the low single digits. For the first time in decades, Western experts and media voice a chilling admission. There is no answer for these new weapons. But the shockwave extends well beyond hardware. The psychological toll is profound. Western elites, long convinced of their technological edge, are now seized by doubt and, at times, outright panic. The core of their security doctrine, built on the myth of perpetual innovation, is crumbling before their eyes. This recalls the Sputnik crisis of 1957, when the Soviet Union's launch of the first artificial satellite shattered American confidence and triggered a frantic race for technological catch-up. As certainty evaporates, decision-making grows perilous. Leaders, overwhelmed by information, are forced to choose in an atmosphere thick with fear rather than strategy. The risk of escalation soars when old playbooks are useless and emotion rules over logic. The world saw this dynamic during the July crisis of 1914, when misjudgments and emotional decision-making led to the outbreak of World War I. History offers a dire warning. Moments like these, when confidence and balance dissolve, are when catastrophic errors loom largest. Recall the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, Cold War brinkmanship, and the near misses that almost sparked nuclear disaster. In each case, it was uncertainty and miscalculation, not raw firepower, that brought the world to the brink. What hangs in the balance now is bigger than reputations or diplomatic gamesmanship. At stake is the stability of the global order, the credibility of alliances upon which millions rely, and the security of ordinary people thrust into a world where uncertainty reigns. Consider the economic fallout when trust evaporates. Markets tumble, supply chains falter, and investors flee to safety, triggering recessions that hit every household. As the West scrambles for answers, the old assurances of safety and superiority no longer hold. The world is entering uncharted territory, and the consequences will touch everyone, from policymakers in Washington to families in small European towns. If missiles can outthink defenses and politicians can outtalk reality, what should you, the informed citizen, do now? First, abandon the fantasy of untouchable technology. Every missile shield, no matter how cutting-edge, carries hidden flaws. No wall is unbreakable. Headlines about Western air defenses crumbling are not distant warnings, but a siren blaring at your door. During the early days of the Maginot Line, the French believed they were invulnerable, until German tanks rolled around the fortifications. Second, listen with skepticism when leaders or the media amplify threats. Is this a genuine warning, or just smoke masking their own domestic troubles? Many threats are not about real military intentions, but about controlling the narrative and distracting you from deeper crises. Remember the lead-up to the Iraq War in 2003, when political leaders used exaggerated threats to rally public support and divert attention from unresolved domestic issues. Third, recognize that fear has become a weapon as potent as any missile. Panic and doubt are now manufactured deliberately. Psychological warfare is cheaper than hardware and harder to detect, so your best defense is to remain calm, observant, and analytical. This was true during the height of the Cold War, when civil defense drills and propaganda were used to keep populations compliant and distracted. Fourth, resist getting swept up in daily political drama. Instead, track the silent evolution of technology. Power is shifting in quiet ways, through breakthroughs in missile guidance and air defense, not just grand speeches or televised debates. Those who notice these changes will see where true strength is building. For example, the quiet revolution in drone warfare over the past decade caught many off guard, but those who paid attention to early demonstrations in conflicts like Nagorno-Karabakh saw the writing on the wall. Fifth, always scrutinize the motives behind dramatic promises or dire warnings. When a politician vows total safety, who gains from your belief? When a leader predicts disaster, what are they steering your attention away from? This critical vigilance was essential during the Watergate scandal, when the public learned to question authority and demand transparency. Sixth, start mapping the real risks for yourself. How far are you from key military sites? Is your region a likely flashpoint? Do not depend on analysts who may have their own agendas. Build your own picture of the threats so you are not blindsided. Use online resources, open-source intelligence, and local news to piece together a realistic assessment of your own security environment. Consider joining community preparedness groups or participating in local emergency drills. Finally, remember, the people who keep their heads clear, who do not fall for surges of fear or easy comfort, are the hardest to manipulate. In this era, failing to adapt your mindset could cost you dearly. You risk not just confusion, but also economic loss, political misdirection, or even personal danger. The individuals who best weathered the crises of the 20th century, whether during World War II, the Cuban Missile Crisis, or the fall of the Berlin Wall, were those who stayed calm, informed, and adaptable. The old guarantees are gone. Real security now demands that you pierce the theater and sharpen your judgment. Do not settle for the comfort of old illusions. Be ready to question, to analyze, and to prepare for a world in flux. Ahead, we confront the consequences of this new reality. Are you ready to face what comes after the collapse of old illusions? When the rules of the world shift overnight, will you have the courage to adapt? For generations, we believed Western technology could not be outmatched, that alliances alone would safeguard us. But the ground is moving beneath our feet, and old certainties are dissolving in real time. The recent placement of Tomahawk missiles near Russian borders is not a routine maneuver. It is an unmistakable warning. At the same moment, Western air defenses that once seemed unbreakable are now faltering. Their success rate has plummeted from more than 40% to barely 6%. These are not dry statistics. They are urgent signals that yesterday's security is gone. Russian missile systems now outthink and outrun traditional defenses, exposing the deep flaws in Western strategies. European leaders are scrambling, speaking in threats and reassurances, but their words ring hollow. In America, official statements have turned into a contest of psychological tactics, threats that shake nerves more than any missile strike could. This is no longer just a contest of weapons. It is a battle for the confidence, nerves, and beliefs of entire societies. The real power is shifting, from physical arsenals and formal treaties to the ability to sow doubt and fear. Sticking to the playbooks of yesterday means missing the most dangerous changes of our era. Now, the burden of awareness falls on each of us. If we cling to outdated illusions, we risk much more than reputation. We gamble with security, prosperity, and even our personal safety. The price of denial is to be blindsided by a world that no longer follows familiar rules. So, Will you challenge your assumptions? Will you step into this new reality or hide behind the comforts of the past? The transformation has already begun. The real peril is pretending it has not. Join this urgent conversation. Share your view and help forge a public debate that faces these truths head-on. In times of upheaval, the greatest safeguard is not a missile shield or an alliance, but a society that sees clearly, questions bravely, and adapts quickly. The illusions have shattered. The world is waiting for your response.